There comes a moment in every woman's life when she stops asking, why isn't he choosing me fully? And starts asking, what do I need to say and stand for to be valued the way I deserve? The truth is, it's not about controlling a man or forcing his loyalty. It's about communicating your worth so clearly, so calmly, and so confidently that he chooses to rise to your level or risks losing you entirely. When your words come from self-respect instead of fear, they don't just reach his ears, they hit his heart. And when a man truly understands your value, he doesn't wander, because he knows what he has is rare. When a woman speaks from fear, her words carry a kind of urgency that quietly gives away her power. It sounds like over-explaining, over-questioning, and sometimes even over-apologizing for things she shouldn't feel sorry for. Deep down, that fear usually comes from the worry of losing someone she cares about. And while that feeling is human, the way it's expressed can unintentionally lower her value in his eyes. Not because she isn't worthy, but because fear communicates uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people take things less seriously. A man can sense when a woman is unsure of herself. He hears it in the tone of her voice, in the way she hesitates, and in how she softens her truth just to avoid conflict. When she says things like, it's okay, I understand, even when it's not okay, she teaches him that her standards are flexible. And when standards feel flexible, respect starts to weaken without either of them even realizing it. It's not that he sets out to hurt her, it's that he adjusts to what she allows. But when a woman speaks from self-worth, everything shifts in a way that doesn't need to be loud or aggressive. It's quiet, steady, and grounded. There's no rush in her words, no desperation behind them. She knows what she deserves, and more importantly, she's at peace with walking away from anything that doesn't align with that. That inner certainty changes the entire dynamic, because now she's not speaking to keep him, she's speaking to express herself honestly. There's a powerful difference between saying, I don't want you to leave me, and saying, I value loyalty, and I only invest my energy where that's respected. One is rooted in fear of loss, while the other is rooted in clarity of value. The second statement doesn't chase, it sets a standard. And standards naturally create respect. When a woman begins to operate from this place, she stops trying to compete with other women for his attention. She understands that her uniqueness isn't something that can be duplicated or replaced easily. That confidence doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from self-awareness. She knows the way she loves, the way she supports, the way she shows up, and she knows that those qualities are meaningful. So instead of trying to convince him to see her worth, she simply stands in it. This kind of energy makes a man pause. It makes him think. Because now he's not dealing with someone who's trying to hold on to him at all costs. He's dealing with someone who is offering something valuable, but only to the right person. And that creates a subtle pressure, not from force, but from realization. He begins to understand that if he doesn't rise to meet her, someone else will. Speaking from self-worth also means being honest without being emotional to the point of losing control. It means you can express your feelings clearly without turning them into accusations. For example, instead of saying, you never care about me, which can put him on the defensive, a woman grounded in self-worth might say, I feel value when there's consistency and effort. That's important to me. The message is still strong, but it's delivered in a way that invites understanding rather than conflict. There's strength in that kind of communication because it shows emotional maturity. It shows that she's not trying to attack him. She's simply expressing what she needs to feel secure and respected. And when a man sees that, he's more likely to listen, not because he's being forced to, but because he recognizes that she's coming from a place of truth. Another important part of speaking from self-worth is letting go of the need for immediate reassurance. Fear wants answers right away. It wants constant validation, constant proof that everything is okay. But self-worth is patient. It doesn't chase reassurance. Observes actions. It understands that real commitment is shown over time, not just through words in a moment. When a woman trusts herself enough to step back and watch, instead of constantly reacting, she gains clarity. She starts to see patterns, effort, and intentions more clearly. And that clarity allows her to make better decisions. Not emotional ones, but grounded ones. A man respects a woman who doesn't crumble under uncertainty. When he sees that she can hold her composure, that she doesn't panic or lose herself the moment something feels off, it changes how he approaches her. He becomes more aware of his actions because he knows she's paying attention, not in a controlling way, but in a self-respecting way. Over time, this kind of presence builds a deeper level of attraction and respect. It's not based on drama or emotional highs and lows. It's based on stability, clarity, and confidence. And those are the qualities that make a connection last. When you speak from self-worth, you're not trying to make him stay. You're giving him a reason to choose you fully. You're showing him that being with you isn't just about feelings. It's about values, standards, and mutual respect. And if he's the right man, he won't feel pushed away by that. He'll feel drawn to it, because at the end of the day, a man doesn't stay loyal because he's afraid of losing control. He stays loyal because he recognizes the value of what he has, and he knows it's not something he can easily replace. A man's loyalty is not something that can be forced into existence through pressure, control, or constant monitoring. It grows naturally when he feels something meaningful in the connection, when being with you feels like a choice he wants to make every day, not something he's being pushed into. This is where many women unintentionally create distance. The more they try to control the outcome, the more the relationship begins to feel like an obligation instead of a desire. And when something feels like an obligation, it slowly loses its emotional depth. Control often shows up in subtle ways. It's in the repeated questioning, the checking, the testing, and the silent expectations that he should act a certain way without being told why. While it may come from a place of wanting security, it can make a man feel like he's constantly being evaluated rather than appreciated. When someone feels like they're always under pressure to prove themselves, they don't relax into the relationship. They start to pull back from it. But when a woman makes a man feel chosen, everything softens. Being chosen is a powerful emotional experience. It tells him that he's not just an option, not just someone filling a space, but someone you genuinely see and value. That feeling doesn't come from grand speeches or dramatic moments. It comes from how you communicate your belief in him and your appreciation for what he brings into your life. There's a big difference between saying, "You better not mess this up," and saying, "I chose you because I see something real in you." One statement creates pressure and fear of failure. The other creates a sense of purpose and pride. When a man feels like you see something good in him, he naturally wants to protect that image. He wants to live up to it, not because he has to, but because he doesn't want to disappoint the woman who believes in him. This doesn't mean ignoring red flags or pretending everything is perfect. It means understanding that appreciation and encouragement often go further than criticism when it comes to shaping behavior. When a man feels valued, he becomes more invested. When he feels constantly criticized or doubted, he becomes distant or defensive. Making him feel chosen also means being intentional with your attention. In a world where people are easily distracted and constantly seeking validation elsewhere, giving someone your focused, genuine attention is rare. When you listen to him, support, and acknowledge his efforts, you create a space where he feels seen. And when a man feels truly seen, he stops looking for that feeling in other places. At the same time, it's important to understand that making him feel chosen does not mean losing yourself in the process. There's a difference between choosing someone and centering your entire world around them. The moment you abandon your own identity, your own standards, and your own needs just to keep him, the dynamic shifts in a way that reduces your value. A healthy connection is built when both people feel chosen while still maintaining their individuality. When you balance appreciation with self-respect, you create a powerful dynamic. You're showing him that you want him, but you're not dependent on him for your happiness. That kind of energy is magnetic because it removes pressure while still maintaining depth. He doesn't feel trapped. He feels invited. Another important part of this is how you handle mistakes or moments of tension. If every disagreement turns into blame or emotional overwhelm, it creates a pattern where he associates conflict with negativity. But when you approach situations with calm communication and a focus on understanding, it changes how he experiences the relationship. He begins to feel safe being open rather than guarded. For example, instead of reacting with anger when something feels off, you might say, "I value honesty and consistency. When that's there, I feel secure in what we have." This kind of statement doesn't attack, it communicates. It gives him insight into what matters to you without making him feel cornered. When a man doesn't feel cornered, he's more likely to step forward willingly. He doesn't feel like he's being pushed into a role. He feels like he's growing into it. And growth that comes from within is always stronger than behavior that comes from external pressure. There's also something important to understand about how men process respect and admiration. When a woman expresses belief in a man's character, it taps into his desire to be seen as capable, dependable, and strong. That doesn't mean he's perfect, but it means he wants to be perceived in a positive light by the woman he cares about. When you reinforce that image through your words and actions, it strengthens his emotional connection to you. At the same time, this approach naturally filters out the wrong kind of man. A man who isn't willing to rise, who doesn't value loyalty or commitment, won't respond to this kind of energy in a meaningful way. And that's important because it shows you clearly where he stands without you having to chase answers. The right man will feel inspired. The wrong man will feel uncomfortable. And that discomfort reveals everything you need to know. When you stop trying to control and start choosing with intention, you create a relationship dynamic built on mutual desire rather than fear. He's not staying because he has to. He's staying because he wants to. And that difference is what makes loyalty feel natural instead of forced. In the end, the goal isn't to make a man feel restricted. It's to make him feel like being with you is a decision he's proud of. When he feels that, when he understands your value and feels appreciated within it, his focus shifts. He stops looking around, not because he's being watched, but because he's already found something that fulfills him. One of the most important truths to understand in any relationship is that love without boundaries doesn't stay pure. It becomes confusing. And confusion is where respect slowly begins to fade. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments. When something doesn't feel right but goes unspoken. When a line is crossed but excused. When discomfort is swallowed just to keep the peace. Over time, those small moments build into a pattern where your needs are no longer clearly seen or valued. Setting boundaries is not about being difficult or controlling. It's about being clear on what you accept and what you don't, and having the courage to stand by that clarity. A strong woman understands that boundaries are not walls to push someone away. They are guidelines that show someone how to treat her. Without those guidelines, people will act based on what feels easiest for them, not necessarily what is best for the relationship. Many women struggle with boundaries because they associate them with conflict. They worry that speaking up will push him away, create tension, or make them seem demanding. So instead, they stay quiet, hoping things will improve on their own. But silence in situations that require clarity doesn't protect the relationship, it weakens it. Because when something matters to you and you don't express it, you slowly start to lose connection, not just with him, but with yourself. There's a difference between being patient and being passive. Patience allows space for growth. Passivity allows patterns of disrespect to continue unchecked. And the longer those patterns go on, the harder they are to break. That's why boundaries need to be set early and reinforced consistently. Not aggressively, but firmly. A boundary doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. In fact, the most effective boundaries are often delivered in a calm, steady tone. It's not about raising your voice. It's about standing your ground. When you say something like, "I'm not comfortable with that," or "that doesn't work for me," you're not attacking him. You're expressing yourself. And how he responds to that tells you everything about his respect for you. What makes a boundary truly strong is not just saying it, but maintaining it. Anyone can state a standard in a moment of emotion, but consistency is what gives that standard meaning. If you say you won't tolerate something but then accept it repeatedly, your words lose their weight. Not because you're weak, but because the message becomes unclear. People respond to patterns more than promises. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means alignment. It means your actions match your words. When a man sees that you follow through on what you say, he begins to understand that your standards are real. And when standards are real, they are respected. There's also a quiet confidence in a woman who sets boundaries without apology. She doesn't feel the need to over-explain or justify why something matters to her. She knows her values, and she honors them. That kind of self-respect is deeply attractive because it shows emotional strength, It shows that she is not easily swayed by fear or pressure. At the same time, setting boundaries doesn't mean shutting someone out emotionally. It means creating a space where both people can feel respected and understood. Healthy boundaries actually make relationships stronger because they remove uncertainty. When both people know what is acceptable and what isn't, there's less room for misunderstandings and resentment. For example, if loyalty is important to you, it's not enough to assume he understands that. It needs to be communicated clearly, not in a threatening way, but in an honest one. Saying, I value honesty and exclusivity in a relationship, sets a tone. It lets him know what kind of connection you're building and what's expected within it. It's not a demand. It's a declaration. How he responds to that declaration matters. A man who values you will respect it. He may ask questions. He may take time to adjust, but he won't dismiss it. A man who doesn't value it will either ignore it or challenge it in a way that makes you question yourself. And that's where boundaries become not just about protection, but about clarity. They reveal who he is. Another important part of boundaries is being willing to walk away when they are consistently disrespected. This is where many women feel stuck, because walking away is not easy when emotions are involved. But staying in a situation where your standards are repeatedly ignored slowly erodes your self-worth. It creates a dynamic where you feel unheard, undervalued, and emotionally drained. Walking away doesn't always mean ending everything immediately. Sometimes it means creating distance and allowing space for reflection. It shows that you're serious about your standards without needing to argue or convince. It shifts the focus from trying to change him to honoring yourself. A man respects what he cannot easily control or take for granted. When he sees that your presence in his life is tied to how he treats you, it changes how he approaches the relationship. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. He understands that being with you requires effort, respect, and consistency. Boundaries also protect your emotional energy. They prevent you from overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending yourself in situations where it's not being reciprocated. They allow you to invest your time and energy in a way that feels balanced rather than draining. There's a certain peace that comes with knowing you've expressed yourself clearly and stood by it. It removes the internal conflict of wondering whether you should have said something or done something differently. You know where you stand, and that clarity brings strength. In the end, boundaries are not about pushing someone away. They are about pulling the right kind of behavior closer. They create a structure where respect can grow naturally. And when respect is present, love has a much stronger foundation to stand on. Words can open the door, but it's your presence that determines whether someone chooses to stay. Anyone can say they deserve respect, loyalty, and love. But when your actions consistently reflect those standards, that's when your value becomes undeniable. A man doesn't fully understand what you mean to him just by what you say. He understands it through how he experiences you. The way you carry yourself, the way you respond to situations, the way you give and withdraw your energy, all of it sends a message far louder than words ever could. Many women fall into the habit of overgiving, thinking that if they love harder, give more, and show more patience, he will naturally realize their worth. But the truth is, when something is always available without conditions, it can start to feel expected instead of appreciated. Not because he's a bad person, but because human nature tends to value what feels meaningful and intentional. When your presence is constant, regardless of how you're treated, it loses its sense of significance. Showing your value isn't about playing games or pretending to be unavailable. It's about being intentional with your energy. It's about understanding that your time, your attention, and your emotional investment are all valuable, and they should be given where they are respected and reciprocated. When you begin to operate from that mindset, your presence starts to feel different. It feels grounded, balanced, and purposeful. A man should feel peace when he's around you. Not the kind of peace that comes from silence or avoidance, but the kind that comes from emotional stability. When you're not reacting to every small thing, not creating unnecessary drama, and not letting your emotions control every interaction, you create an environment where he can relax and be himself. That kind of calm energy is rare, and it becomes something he associates with you. At the same time, your presence should also carry strength. Peace without strength can be mistaken for passivity. Strength shows up in how you handle moments when something doesn't feel right. It's in your ability to step back instead of chasing, to stay composed instead of reacting impulsively, and to address issues directly without losing your dignity. When a man sees that you can be both warm and strong, it creates a balance that is deeply attractive. Consistency plays a huge role in how your value is perceived. If your mood, your standards, and your behavior change depending on how he treats you, it creates confusion. But when you remain consistent, when your kindness, your boundaries, and your self-respect stay steady regardless of circumstances, it builds trust. He begins to understand who you are, what you stand for, and what he can expect from you. This consistency means not tolerating behavior that goes against your values. If you say you deserve respect but accept disrespect to avoid conflict, your actions send a mixed message. Over time, those mixed signals weaken your position in the relationship. But when your actions align with your words, your standards become clear without needing constant explanation. Another important part of showing your value is maintaining your own life outside of the relationship. When your happiness, your focus, and your identity are entirely centered around him, it creates an imbalance. Not only does it put pressure on him, but it also takes away from your individuality. A woman who has her own goals, her own interests, and her own sense of fulfillment brings a different kind of energy into a relationship. She's not looking to be completed, she's already whole, and she's choosing to share her life with someone. That independence is powerful because it shows that you're with him by choice, not by need. And when a man feels that, it changes how he sees you. He understands that your presence in his life is something valuable, not something guaranteed. That awareness naturally makes him more attentive, more appreciative, and more invested. Your presence should also feel supportive, not suffocating. Supporting a man doesn't mean agreeing with everything he does or losing your voice. It means being someone who encourages growth, who listens, and who stands beside him without trying to control his every move. When he feels supported rather than restricted, he's more likely to open up and build a deeper connection. At the same time, knowing when to step back is just as important as knowing when to be present. If you're always the one reaching out, always the one fixing things, always the one keeping the connection alive, it creates an imbalance where he doesn't have to put in the same effort. Stepping back doesn't mean playing games. It means allowing space for him to show up. It gives him the opportunity to invest, to miss you, and to recognize your importance. When a man experiences a woman who brings peace, strength, consistency, and self-respect into his life, it creates a sense of emotional security that is hard to replace. He begins to associate you with stability, not chaos, with clarity, not confusion. And in a world where many connections feel temporary or uncertain, that kind of presence stands out. Over time, this is what shifts his mindset. It's not about controlling his actions or constantly reminding him of your worth. It's about creating an experience that speaks for itself. When he feels the difference in how his life is with you compared to without you, the decision becomes clear in his own mind. A man doesn't stop looking elsewhere because he's told to. He stops because he no longer feels the need to. He recognizes that what he has is meaningful, and more importantly, he understands that it's not something he can take lightly. That realization doesn't come from pressure. It comes from the consistent experience of being with someone who truly knows her value and lives it every day.